Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Thomas Steininger. I welcome you to Radio Evolve, our international global webcast for consciousness and culture. And I'm very happy to have my dear friend Bayo Akomolafe with us. Bayo, great to see you. Great that you're with us. Thank you for joining Radio Evolve.
Great to be with you again, brother.
May I introduce you to whoever doesn't know who you are? Bayo Akomolafe, a lecturer, speaker, proud diaper changer. Is that still true? Are you still diaper changer?
That has changed a bit.
I guess that it's changed a bit.
I need to update the bio.
Bayo curates an earthwide project for the recalibration of our ability to respond to civilizational crisis. And I guess we are in a civilizational crisis, a project framed within a feminist ethos and inspired by indigenous cosmologies. He considers this a shared art, exploring the edges of intelligible post-humanist ideas, the mysterium of quantum mechanics, and the liberating sermon of ecofeminism. He is executive director and chief curator for the Emergence Network and much more. And Bayo, more than anything else, you are just a very interesting thinker, lecturer, and observer of our times. So I just want to ask you a simple question. What is important right now?
I have just the answer for you.
Good.
I know exactly what to say. What is important right now is June 30th.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's the most important thing right now. June 30th happens to be the birthday of my son, who's 3 years old.
Yeah.
Kea Abayomi is his name. And he represents not just a son to me, he's the figure of eruptions in the landscape of EJ's and my life. EJ is my wife, for those who are listening, also a friend to Thomas. Our son represents this cataclysmic event, almost, that is inviting us to relearn the way we meet the world, the way we understand normal, the way we understand ourselves. So he's like a trace in the sky, like a messianic burst. June 30th also happens to be the day of the Tunguska event. The Tunguska event in 1908 was an atmospheric phenomenon. Some attribute it to be a meteor and an asteroid exploding a few hundred feet above the ground, somewhere in Siberia. And this event is so powerful. It has been compared to the Hiroshima and Nagasaki nuclear bomb blasts. It flattened tens of thousands of trees. We don't still understand what happened. We just knew that something exploded in midair and everything flattened.
When was that?
This was 1908, June 30th.
1908, okay.
1908, the Tunguska event in Siberia, somewhere in a forest in Siberia. So not many humans were affected by this. It was mainly trees and curiosity. And with that flattening, it basically liquefied the ground, turned it into liquid for a very, very infinitesimal moment in time. Everything became fluid. I think of my son and the Tunguska event diffractively, almost like, like this eruption, this cosmic appearing that renders everything indeterminate, so that we cannot speak in the same way we know how to speak before. And all the ways we know how to categorize the world and say, this is important, this is not important, this is big, this is small, this is here, this is there, becomes indeterminate. So in response to your question, and in my saying June 30th, I'm saying it's almost impossible to know what is important. That the blasts of the coronavirus, the blasts of the Anthropocene, the blasts of George Floyd, and all these epidemiological, racial, climatic blasts blasting into each other have rendered our world very molten. There's hardly solid ground left. There's hardly fundamentals we can plant our feet on. And now we must ask the question and stay with the trouble of not exactly knowing our way around what is now important. So the answer to the question is the question. What is now important? What is now important?
I mean, this event in Siberia,
Yes.
I don't know if you consciously used it as an example, but I guess you did, because somehow the virus is flattening our global atmosphere right now in a way that not only flats are falling and are flat. As you're saying, a lot is falling, a lot is flat, and also the smartest of the smartest are in a point where they admit that they don't know, which is maybe a progress, which is maybe good, which is maybe a moment where we realize that we really don't know. Maybe we haven't known anyway before, but we thought so. But many agree that this time is a turning point, a point where something happens. I don't even know if it's a turning point. And the question is, of course, how to deal with it. How to deal with it. I mean, we can, out of whatever fear or whatever the motivation is, kind of group around strong leaders and look for security. We can kind of have also kind of solutions of the better world that we already know how to create them and now try to execute them. And I know that you are someone who doesn't go with answers like this, and that's the reason why I wanted to ask you, because in some way, maybe that's not fair, but I say it anyway. This is your moment. Because things that you were saying all the time, I mean, we had several conversations over the last 10 years, 15 years, I don't know. But you were always saying things that now are very much echoed by the reality that we are living in. So is basically the reality catching up with you?
In a sense, these things have happened before, right? This is not the first time that the world has ended. It has ended many times before. I know people speak about advents. Melassur, the French philosopher, speaks about advents. Others speak about the great demise of multiple civilizations, the industrial turn, and this marking some kind of shift. And at the same time, you know, I feel that that even though this has happened before, not in the same way, obviously, even though this has happened before, this is unprecedented. Not just the details, but the way we're approaching it. It's rather unprecedented. The epidemiological variety of viruses in the air, the micro and macro fascisms that are at large. You spoke about people running to strong leaders and strong men. There'll be all kinds of responses in these times. That makes me pause when I say this is the age of the new. I don't know how to speak like that with that kind of certainty. But I do find that there is a kind of response that might be precious. And that is to work with the fluidity and the indeterminacy of this time,
Mm.
so that we don't repeat the familiar, so that we don't reinforce the status quo. Now, that is some kind of different kind of work. It's not exactly clear how to go about that, but I feel that in geological shifts, and history tells us that some of the sanctuaries of old were built on fissures or fault lines, in the ground when the whole earth vibrated in an earthquake and the ground split open. You know, people would, civilizations or societies would build sanctuaries, temples on that fault line or close to that fault line because they knew that a crack in the ground was a generous space, was a generous place. That was where they could hear ancestors. That was where they could receive insights from underground, what the Greeks called katabasis. So I do feel that there are cracks everywhere. The land isn't smooth anymore. And now there is a felt invitation to stay with those cracks. That's what I feel is really vital now.
When you say stay with those cracks, this is a message I very much connect you with, because every time when people seek for answers, you are one of the ones who basically says, stay with the cracks. And just there's one sentence of you that Elizabeth and I used so many times. Times are really getting serious. We have to slow down. Yeah. Which is something which for me is very much Bayo. Why?
Why do we need to slow down?
Stay with the cracks? Why slow down?
I theorize cracks as sites of queer production of different kinds of values and possibilities that are not available to the surface. And so what do I mean here? That how we behave, how we respond, how we think might be thought of as a surface phenomenon. More or less, we think alike. Even when we're in opposition to each other, we enact the imperatives and the ideas of vast networks and systems. We think like modern citizens. We think with the city, and the city thinks through us. So I dare say redemption. Let me use that word, even though it's loaded and charged. Redemption comes when a rift in the ground opens up, and then new things can be produced. When I think of cracks, I think a crack is a place where a name or tool does something else that tools are not supposed to do. Cracks are in human beings and identities. Cracks are everywhere. It's when something happens, an event that isn't anticipated or computed or expected. Something like a miraculous place. I can use the Congo River, as an example. Somewhere in the middle, it's not quite the middle, but there's a higher and a lower river. Between those, is a very rich place where strange species of fish have been found. And it's this place where evolution just kind of quickened, if you will. Everything just kind of sped up. So people going there now are finding species of fish that you wouldn't find anywhere else in the world. I feel cracks are places of abundance like that, where questions, where new ways of thinking, where new ways of conducting inquiry can happen and are invited to happen.
But there's something with what you're saying that stands out for me very much, and I just want to see if you would see it the same way, because the way you are talking, to stay with the cracks, you have to have a lot of trust in cracks, because when you're talking about the Congo River, you're talking about place of abundance,
Yeah.
One also could talk in cracks, talking about cracks, places of the abyss, and of something that I really have to, we as a species, or even we as life, have to find protection. You're not going there. There's something where you are more cautious about our reactions to try to protect something, to try to find a solution, where I feel that you're always calling us to go where usually the place where we fear most, and that you think that whatever is needed is there. Why?
This is partly due to my immersion in my own traditions and the teachings of those traditions. That when you're met with something exceedingly monstrous, when you're met with trouble, the thing to do is not to run away. If you run away, you risk getting yourself caught again. It's very hard to escape, a storm or a hurricane if you're close by. You don't want to run away. The thing to do is to fall down flat, is to prostrate yourself to the ground, right? Is to kiss your head to the ground. And Yoruba people encoded that lesson in the way we greet our elders. We fall to the ground and we put our faces to the ground. This act of prostration, this act of lying flat to the ground in humility, in surrender, could also be diffractively read into the ancient myth of the libation. That it's when the libation was poured that the monstrous revenge or vengeful, destructive acts of an Egyptian goddess named Hathor was stayed. That it was only then that we found the stability that we wanted so badly. So the thing to do is to keep offering libations. And I feel that there is this, around the world, there are invitations to fall, to descend. Katabasis is a word for descending into the underground. Mythologies and stories across the world invite people to fall, to go to the place of darkness, right? Go to the place of kairotic darkness and meet the monsters that you have banished away from your civilizations. Until you do that, you risk continuing in the same shapes that gave birth to the trouble that you now see. What you're seeking is not healing. What you're seeking is dismantling. What you're seeking is not increased capacity. What you're seeking is incapacitation. What you're seeking is to be undone. And in being undone, you might notice other ways of being alive in the world. That's why I say the things I do.
The way I hear you, and that may be a projection, and I want to find out. But when you talk about basically also let go of the civilizations, that also talks about the civilizations that we are living in. And the civilizations that we are living in is, if I may call it this way, predominantly a white European civilization. Yeah. And I am sitting here as a white European. You are sitting here as a black brother. Somehow we are together in the same story, but we are also different parts of the story. That's part of it too.
Yeah.
And part of my story is, if I like it or don't like it, this civilization, to a big degree, is my civilization. My people, whoever however far you want to go, we created this the last 500 years. And we believed in it. And we thought that this is salvation for the world that is coming. You seem to come from a different place, and I think part of the conversation that we need to have is also the conversation from these different sides. is this part of is this part of our conversation? Does this have to be part of our conversation?
I believe so, brother, because I believe the Italian philosopher Giorgio Gambin writes about the anthropological project. And by the anthropological project, the anthropos is invoked. And the anthropos is the ongoing production of the individual, the ongoing historical, conceptual, ecological production of man. And man is a racialized figure. The human is a racialized figure. Historically, not everyone has been granted access into that category of being human. Modernity itself is premised on a very troubling binary between the human and the animal. And even when access has been granted to persons like me or civilizations like the ones that I come from, it has usually been to occupy the lower end of a spectrum, to sit closer to the animal, so that even the form of inclusion that materializes in our activisms today, in our nation states today, in our international global order today, is a form of violence, is a form of occlusion and deeper problematic exclusions and displacements. So at the heart of this conversation is the figure of man, which is already invoked in the concept of the Anthropocene. And you know, the anthropological project winds or its way or sympathizes closely with that other notion of whiteness being a network of archetypes and longings and strategies, not just white identified persons, but more than human contributions as well. So that actually it's not entirely your civilization. It's the civilization of microbes and bacteria in your gut and in our guts that is reinforcing these, what we call our civilization. In a sense, it has never been ours. We've contributed to it. We've been enlisted by it, but it has never been fully ours. That's my takeoff point, my point of departure for noticing that the kind of work we want to do today is not to vilify the Anthropocene or to vilify the anthropos, which would be reinforcing some other problematic binaries that reinforce the same terrain we're trying to recover from. It is to do the kind of work that allows us to touch our oddkin. That's what Donna Haraway calls it, a biologist, the oddkin. The others in the world that we're already entangled with. And I'm talking about tables and chairs and pixels and dogs and ideas. The invitation is to increase the sociality of behaving, of contributions today, and notice that man is not the only agential being in the room. We're not the only ones. We've always been indebted to the world at large. So that is the way that I'll frame that problem.
Maybe this is in some way also the crux of the matter, because I mean, I was asking this question also because a big percentage of our audience here comes from this white man background.
Yeah,
that's most of us are coming from this perspective, and the way you put it right now, you put something in the center of the question that is unquestionable, the highest of our values. And with manhood, I don't mean kind of the masculine, whatever. I mean enlightenment, our capacity, our capacity to freely do the good thing, and to be a good human being, to be a good citizen, to be a good citizen of the world, to be a good brother to all brothers and sisters, all these kind of capacities, which honestly is very dear to me. Just when I mention it, I can't take a neutral position to that. When I just voice it, I feel it. This is close to my heart. And you're saying, wait a moment, maybe there's something to look at. Am I right?
Yes, I mean, this isn't new, right, Thomas? That same feeling of that same surety, that certainty, that's confidence that we are good people and we are doing the right thing, and we are working in the name of Her Majesty and for the glorification of modern civilization, led to the enslavement of 11 million or more people from the continent of Africa. I mean, the first slave ship of repute that was blown by the wind to African shores was named after Jesus Christ. It was called Jesus of Lubeck. Lubeck being a ship-making, an old city in now present Germany. So Jesus of Lubeck was manned by what's his name? I forget his name. Sir Francis. I forget. And he would pray, every day on the ship. He would pray as they stole people, and they would commit their voyages to the hand of the supreme moral being of the universe, as people were shackled, to despair and suffering. So I think, in a sense, the liberal humanist myth is being tasked in these times. Liberal humanism being the stickiest political story, that we are internally good, that we are the ground of rational thinking, and rational thinking represents the highest form of thinking, that we are masters of ourselves, masters of interoception, the interiority of our feelings, that we have self-knowledge, and that nature, this is European romanticism from the 18th century. Nature is a beautiful outside thing, it's outside and it's beautiful, and it's harmonious. It comes together. But we are learning that, nature produced the coronavirus, and the coronavirus is anything but harmonious. And nature sometimes will withdraw its endorsement, and that we are indebted to this.
Okay, let's talk about the coronavirus, because the coronavirus somehow is exactly in line with everything that we are talking about, because of course the response, I call it the European response, is vaccination.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about the modern human world, and when you're talking about the microbes, what came to my mind was the coronavirus. That's part of it. In another conversation I had just a couple of days ago, I heard the first time that 25% of the DNA that is live in my body are viruses, is microbes.
Viruses.
25%. That's not nothing. And so there's this thing, this microbe, this virus. There's this threat. However, you think it's over-exaggerated or not over-exaggerated, I would like to leave beside for the moment, but it's there, and hundreds of thousands of people dying, and it out of the virus itself, or out of fear response, or out of people to make power moves with all of this. The economy worldwide is at a halt. The US is in a poverty, not the poverty crisis, it's in a hunger crisis, like not since 1929. And these are always quite frightening situations. And yes, I want to be. I want to have a good response. Yes, I want to do the right thing. And I want to have an ecological response. I also want to be with nature. I want to be with the virus. I want to be not just enlightened, but I want to be also postmodern enlightened. And I want to embrace my Black brothers and sisters and all of that. But if I just may push you, it seems that you think that's more of the same.
I think so, brother. That's my fear too. When the virus hit earlier this year, I wrote about, even before it did, I wrote January 2nd, 2020, that I felt very strong energies, and I knew I wasn't the only one. But I wrote about this being the year of the third way and the fugitive path. And by that I meant, that as things get crazy, we will need something more than solutions to address this. And I didn't know about a pandemic then. And then the pandemic hit, and well, we fell into quarantine. And months afterwards, here we are now in the month of December, at the end of the year of the pandemic, and we're still trapped in the normal. I can tell you how things are unfolding here in India. There isn't some kind of even policy shift. Like, maybe we should be humble about downing trees and cutting down, encroaching on environments. Maybe we should rethink this giant metro train system that we're trying to build, which is really happening here. Instead, everything is just fast forward. We've missed a lot of time. Let's speed on. And so you speak about the vaccine being a rational response. Yes, it's this, I don't want to call it a Eurocentric, since the borders of Europe are not just in Europe. The borders of Europe and Euro-America are almost global, not total, but almost global. And it seems most people, at least that are talked about in mass media, are concerned that we need to get a vaccine to cure, to save the day. But what we're now responding to is the modern virus. It was a new materialist position. I wouldn't even call it a new materialist position, but there's a particular school of thought that has to do with the generous materiality of everything, that says everything is so relational that our rationalities cannot capture it. A part of itself withdraws into itself. It's unavailable for analysis. It's unavailable for experimentation. It's unavailable for intelligibility. That's what I call the crack. That there's some aspect of the world that does not want to be seen by humans, which is a scandal to modern citizens. There's an aspect of the world that is beyond articulation. There's an aspect of this virus that we are not meeting. We're only meeting the enemy, right? We want to kill the virus, get rid of the virus, get rid of climate change. It's the theory of war over and over again. And what we miss is that even if we won this war, we would be back where we started, inside the prison of the anthropological project that sees us as central to the world, that does not see viruses as living beings having their claims in how the world comes to matter. And so we're trapped in the same bubble of doing and repeating the same over again. And finally, on this coronavirus topic, in India, in Kerala, I read in the heat of the pandemic that some women went to a beach and they built an altar, and they dedicated this altar composed of biscuits and sweets and toffees. They built this altar dedicated to the corona goddess. And it was in the newspaper. And I remember people laughing about that. Oh, that's a nonsensical response. We need a serious business approach to stuff. But a serious business approach has left us in the quicksand. We're stuck. We need something different, weird.
So how do we meet this?
Brother, that's how do we meet this? I wish I had perfectly framed answers to regurgitate every time I'm asked this question. But I feel that this is this is a dynamic question. In part, it's an impossible question. Why do I say it's impossible? Because uh, on one end, it's not a question that can be easily answered yes, but on one end, it's the question kind of reinstalls the human as the holder of agency. Like, what do I do about this? What do I do about the world? What do I do about these changes? The risk of that question is that it tends to blind us to the other doings that are around us, the other things that are agentially alive, the other activisms,
Mhm.
bacterial, microbial, animist, ancestral, ecological, archetypal activisms that are working. We tend to frame the anthropological as the center of transformation. But this, when we notice the other swirling masses around us and we say, oh, we're not the only one in the room, then the question might transform. And yet, the question is quite situated. And I understand the condition for that because we don't want to be overwhelmed and we don't want to drown away. We want to thrive. We want to live well with people. We want to live, well with the world around us. So I understand where the question is coming from, but it needs us to meet the complexity and the dynamism of a world that exceeds us. So what I've been doing is I've been framing a conceptual holder or device, which I call making sanctuary. And making sanctuary is a way to invite inquiry to happen around this question you've just held.
Mhm.
That what do we do today? Who do we meet? Whose agency do we appeal to? Where
Mhm.
is the power? Who is the actor? Questions like that.
Of course, the question, how do we meet this? Maybe sounds different if we slightly rephrase it and ask, how do we meet them?
Yes, I love that. I love that.
And if you rephrase it this way, how can we meet them?
Yeah. Yeah. How can we meet them? That's a beautiful question. How can we meet them? How can we make ourselves available to be met by them?
Mhm.
Right? It's humble. And humble humility comes with a coming down to earth. The humus is in the word, right?
Mhm.
Earth. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to fall off our high horses.
We are also coming to the end of our 45 minutes here.
Yeah.
And I know that falling from our high horses is also, at least as I understand the core of what you ask us to do. But also to fall there to be able to meet. I'm still with what you said in the middle of the conversation about your own tradition, where you just knee down. I can't even remember
Prostrate. Yes.
prostrate to whom and what, but it was a powerful image. And I think just as a human position to take to prostrate, and maybe not even knowing who I'm prostrating to or who we are prostrating to, but acknowledge that there is something to prostrate to is maybe also a good starting point to meet them, whoever they are.
Yes. Yes. Yes, you know how they say, well, I'm not exactly a wildlife person. I'm quite indoorsy. But you know how they say when you meet certain beasts, animals,
Uh-huh.
powerful elders, living in the wilds, you curtsy or you bow your head, you bow your head to approach. You don't look directly into their eyes. I think it's with silverback gorillas or something.
Uh-huh.
But I think this almost the same idea is here, where we are met by this is not something that will. This is an ironic victory. If Pfizer and Moderna, you know, become the end of the conversation. Like we've come up with a virus, with a vaccine, I said a virus. We've come up with a vaccine, everyone back to the office. everyone back to normal. Let's fly even twice as much as we did before. Let's do everything as we used to. Yeah, it's civilizations never know when they're about to die. I think things even ramp up when it's at close to its demise. So I think there is generosity even in the midst of ruin and demise. And there's an invitation for us to meet those many manifold ones that are around us. What kind of inquiry could that be if people composed a weird politics around that? What could that look like?
Bayo, thank you so much for this conversation.
I am grateful, brother. Thank you.